Welcome everybody to another layout update on the VTR GMRC layout build. I know it's been a bit since the last one. I had some issues with volume on the first two videos on this layout. Wanted to go ahead and get those corrected and give some time in between the re-uploads on those videos before going ahead and making another layout update. So I appreciate your patience on that. As you can see, there's been a lot of changes between those videos and this one. I've got a ton of information to go over, a lot of new things to show you that I'm very excited to show you. So let's get right into it. So before I go into talking about the track and what I've done for that, I wanted to talk about the backdrop. I'm sure to the viewer this is the most noticeable difference. It definitely it draws you in. Nothing compares to having a nice backdrop image. So the backdrop images that I have on this layout, the photo backdrop images, are from tracksideScenery.com. I searched for weeks, probably spent an hour a day for several weeks just reading reviews, looking up a bunch of different websites and comparing them until I finally found tracksideScenery.com. I really loved the range of products that they had, and I sent a few emails to discuss my needs and some customizations that I was looking for to, I believe his name is Joey Riccardi, is the owner of Trackside Scenery, and I told him what I was looking for, and we worked on putting some images together to get me what I wanted. And the mountain range that you're seeing in front of you is one of those. And as we move around the layout, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the customizations that I've done for the GMRC build. Now, I'm not sponsored by them at all. This is just a review by a very happy customer. And if you're looking for a good photo backdrop, definitely check out tracksideScenery.com. So we're currently in front of the North Walpole module. Now, I've made some changes to this module compared to what I discussed in the first update video when I was building the benchwork, or after I had completed the benchwork and I had discussed some plans that I had. So one change I made was I widened the riverbed for the Connecticut River that's going to be flowing beneath the Stone Arch Bridge that connects the North Walpole Yard and the Bellows Falls Yard. I didn't like how narrow it was, and I contemplated making this wider, but I left enough room for the roadway that's going to pass between the riverbed and the spur tracks that you see there. The other thing that I changed was I did decide to go ahead and keep all three tracks for the engine house and car shop, and you can see the VTR locomotive and that boxcar sitting on those tracks. This is something I went back and forth on for, I don't even know, probably a couple months, even from the point of initial design to up until the point of installation. I was still a little hesitant, but I wanted to stick to the original track plan in its entirety, and I did have to finagle the tracks a little bit to make it work and change some things to make it work. But overall, it worked out just fine, and it's gonna give me exactly what I'm looking for. The one compromise I did have to make was I will have to scratch build an engine house kit and car shop kit versus purchasing one, which I had originally planned to do. So the spacing between those tracks was originally planned for a store-bought kit. And now the spacing is a little closer, so I could either modify a kit or scratch build. But I think the scratch building could be interesting. I would have something unique, something that someone else doesn't have on their layout. So I'm definitely going to go ahead and do that. So one of the customizations that Joey Riccardi at Trackside Scenery was able to make for me was the addition of a paved road about 10 inches in on one of the backdrop images. So I needed a road that curved, or I needed a paved road specifically that curved to the right behind the engine house and car shop. So I had asked him to place the center of the road 10 inches from the left side of the image. And he was able to do this, and this allowed placement of the road between the riverbed and the placement of the engine house structure itself. So this is one of the many customizations that they can do for you at Trackside Scenery, and this opened up a whole host of possibilities for me for this layout. So again, can't recommend them enough. It's the little things like this, just the correct positioning of a road, that can really make all the difference. Now looking at the spur tracks in front of us here, you can see the difference in the tie spacing as compared to the main line that's in the center, kind of between those engine house and car shop tracks and the spur tracks. Every spur track on the layout, except for actually the engine house and the car shop tracks, which I'm not sure what I'm going to do with yet, every spur track has this tie spacing. I've gone ahead and clipped, right, removed I think it was every fourth or fifth tie, and I spread out the ties. Now these can still move around, and they have shifted a little bit. I'll have to kind of readjust them, but they're not glued in place, and the track's not glued in place yet. But I've gone ahead and removed the pieces beneath that connect all these ties together so that I could get the spacing that I wanted to have a more realistic appearance for the spur tracks. And you'll see this on each of the spurs as we continue along, but I thought that this would add some additional realism to the layout. This is something that I didn't do on Rocky Valley, and someone had pointed that out, that the tie spacing wasn't prototypical on the spur tracks, and I'd never really thought about that when I designed that layout, when I laid the track. And so I made a note to myself that the next time I built a layout, I would go ahead and do this and try to make the spur tracks more prototypical. And I gotta say, the results, it just looks a whole lot better. And I can't remember the name of the person who made that comment, but I'm very grateful to them for that. It definitely paid off, and I'm definitely going to do this for every project moving forward. There is one more thing that I haven't settled on yet when it comes to North Walpole Yard, and that is the length of the spur track that I guess could be considered the engine house and car shop lead, and that is the spur in the back towards the rock wall, towards the backdrop. You can see where it ends right before the module joint. This is something I had mentioned in the past. I want to extend it over the module joint so that I can store one or two more cars, but I'm still hesitant on this idea. But this is something that's not super important, so again, it's kind of in the back of my mind, something I'll think about, and eventually I'll come to a decision on. So here we're looking at Bellows Falls Yard now, and as you can see, I've got this area completed as well. There was a few changes in this part of the track plan that I've made compared to the original. Nothing significant other than the positioning of the spur tracks in the back, the stub end yard tracks, I guess would be the better description. I made these longer, adding 1 to 2 car spaces, 50-foot car spaces on each, just to allow a little bit more storage or staging, if you want to call it that. And then the actual spur track for the coaches, or for the consist for 405 and the Green Mountain excursion train, is actually a little shorter than the plan called for. This was actually unintentional, but I left it this way because I thought it would be a little too close to the diamond that you can see to the left of the screen. So those two changes in itself, nothing major. The spur tracks, or the yard tracks, I thought was going to be something that would allow a little bit more operational interest, and also just allow a little bit more on layout storage capability. I thought about this in terms of the industries on the layout, and I figured that having a couple additional car spots would definitely be the safer way to go. So for the backdrop image for Bellows Falls Yard, I decided to go with a simple low relief tree line. The scenery in Bellows Falls Yard is going to be very low relief, nothing too heavy other than a few trees, ballast, gravel parking lot, or maybe a paved parking lot, and 2 low relief station buildings. The equipment, I mean, it's going to be for storage of cars, some yard operations, very, very basic. There's not going to be anything too chaotic going on, and I figured a low level tree line would be the way to go as compared to North Walpole Yard, which has a little bit of a low level tree line but transitions to a mountain. This would kind of give a contrast to that, and be able to show a little bit of a difference in the scenery that obviously is found well, not just in New England, obviously nationwide and worldwide, but it would give a little bit of a contrast on the layout. So the interchange here with the diamond was definitely a tricky area. I wasn't anticipating it actually being as tricky as it was. There was a few things that I had to do to make it work. If you look, you can see that the tracks that are perpendicular, that are crossing over the main line for the Green Mountain and Vermont Railway, for the Berkshire Eastern that crosses over it, they're actually shifted. That line is shifted to the left on the roadbed. And this was not intentional, or this was intentional. I had to shift it to the left in order to fit the Model Tech ProTrack rail aligners, I think is what they're called. I had misjudged the size of these when I laid the roadbed. I'd actually laid the roadbed prior to these arriving, and I should have waited for these to arrive. And I had to shift the track over in order to allow these to fit, so that I could get the rail aligners to line up with the module joint precisely. It's off by a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and obviously adjust the roadbed, maybe trim it with a knife or something, but covering this up with ballast, I mean, you wouldn't even really know. You wouldn't even notice. It does bug me a little bit, but I'm going to come up with something for that. And it's just something like that you might overthink. There's little things like that you when you haven't worked with a product, you might not think of something like that. But it's no big deal. It's something I can work around. It's just one of the little obstacles that I've faced in building this layout so far. But again, it's nothing I can't overcome. So when talking with Joey Riccardi at TrackSideScenery.com, there's one area that I forgot to consider when thinking about the background image and how everything sort of connects together. I completely forgot to think about where these tracks are going to. As you can see, the Berkshire and Eastern line that crosses the VTR and GMRC line goes straight into the tree line. I've gotten some ideas on Facebook groups and forum posts about what to do in terms of hiding the line with some trees or some buildings, something like that. I can definitely figure something out. There's always a way to solve a problem. It's just something that I overlooked. I didn't think about it. It's definitely not the most important area to consider. All the primary areas, again, the river, the town scenes, the roads, those were definitely the most important. But, like anything, it's a mistake that I made, and I'll live with it, but I can definitely find an answer. So this truss bridge here is a Walther's kit. It's a 97-foot truss bridge kit that I had purchased a while back. I don't recall if I had mentioned this in any of the previous videos. I think I might have mentioned in the introductory video that I plan to use a bridge. I don't know if I had mentioned a truss bridge specifically, but I did buy this kit and I painted it and weathered it. The bridge deck itself is not attached to the rest of the bridge yet. I need to go ahead and weather that, but I didn't want to attach it until I weathered it. I also need to be able to remove the bridge so I can do the scenery and everything else beneath it. But what I wanted to show you specifically is the river scene behind it. So one of the elements that I had a hard time finding in backdrops was a river scene that I felt was fitting enough for the layout. Now, the truss bridge that crosses the Connecticut River coming out of Bellows Falls actually goes out into a much more open, almost like a harbor. Maybe a harbor is not quite the right word. I don't really know how to describe it, but it goes out into a much more open area. And there's a dam a little bit further away. It's definitely not the same scene that you're seeing here. I couldn't find an image like that on any backdrop website that I liked that was fitting. And I did find this stream here. So I had a crazy idea that I would sort of combine two scenes that you would find on the Green Mountain Railroad. Now there is another truss bridge that looks almost identical to this further down the line on the Green Mountain Railroad that crosses a river that looks much more similar to this. So my thought was to kind of do a selective compression and essentially squeeze, my guess would be 6 to 8 miles of track in between the diamond and this point here. So even though the truss bridge that crosses that river is much further down, I've sort of relocated that truss bridge to this point here. Now, the Connecticut River actually goes through a canal in Bellows Falls and then opens up to that harbor, that cove, whatever you want to call it. And I had started to design this river to be a smooth, concrete-sided canal. And what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to continue with that, but it's going to transition into a river where it'll be a smooth side canal, but then at the very end, as it gets to the backdrop scene, it's going to be much more rocky, and that concrete's going to fade away, and it'll just be natural to hopefully kind of show that transition to sort of power canal to the natural riverbed. Another thing I did on this scene was I made the riverbed a little bit deeper. Not by much, probably a few millimeters at most, but I had to go ahead and do this to actually allow the bridge itself to sit properly into the grooves in the foam. The image that I showed in the first update video when I was talking about the benchwork showed how the truss bridge sat, sort of adjacent to the tracks and sort of sat into the ground itself along the canal, and how the supports sort of sat into that, and there was sort of a concrete platform that the bridge was resting on. I tried to replicate this, but when I actually put the bridge into it, it was just too close to the riverbed. My plan to replicate the deepness of the water is to paint the riverbed black and then a thin layer of Woodland Scenics realistic water, or maybe some kind of a resin or something on top to give the shine, so it won't be very thick, but I needed to add that extra clearance in order to give myself a little bit of wiggle room when adding the scenic materials. When I began constructing this truss bridge kit, I had to decide whether or not I wanted to purchase a pre-built bridge track or if I wanted to go ahead and make my own. Now, the truss bridge kit came with a bridge deck, but it didn't come with the bridge track. You had to purchase that separately. Now, the Walthers kit references the bridge track that you can purchase, and I think it was somewhere around $35 or $40 if I'm not mistaken. And I actually did find some on eBay. I don't even know if they make them new anymore. There was a few available, but I ultimately decided to go ahead and make my own. I had some flex track left over, so I pulled the rails off the flex track, angled the ends of those rails towards one another, and glued the rails in place using some super glue that I had. This was definitely tricky. The super glue that I had dried very, very quickly, so I had to be very precise and get everything glued down in the correct position before it dried. But as you can see, it turned out pretty good. There's a few spots I have to clean up, but I think after some paint touch-up and some weathering, it's going to turn out pretty great. So one of the elements that I wanted to incorporate into this layout build was the use of super elevated curves on the main line. This was something that was more of an afterthought, but I read it in a book and I thought it would be a fantastic idea to incorporate on the GMRC build. So if you look closely in the outer portion of the curve, you'll see the white styrene strips. I've gone ahead and used some pretty thin styrene strips to create the super elevated curves. Now I've gone ahead and done this on the mainline portion only, from Bellows Falls Yard to Chester, and this is going to hopefully add a little bit of realism to the layout and give me something that I haven't had before on this project. So I did go ahead and make some changes to the liftgate structure itself. I did get a couple comments about the liftgate and how it functions. So initially my liftgate structure included some smaller hinges, and there were some larger gaps between the rails themselves on each side. I had never built a liftgate before, and I wasn't really happy with that, but I had done some reading actually as I was building the liftgate that the hinges needed to be above the height of the rails in order to essentially close that gap. So that's what I've gone ahead and done here, is I've put these hinges on blocks just made out of some 2x4s that I've actually just shaved a little bit of the height off of, and I put those hinges on there to get the right height, and this allows the correct gap. There's probably about a millimeter, I would say, gap on each side, just to give a little bit of clearance there, just a little bit of wiggle room for contraction or expansion. Now my basement is pretty well climate controlled, but you never know. You want to give a little bit of wiggle room there just in case anything were to happen. Let's take a closer look at what I've got here for the PCB ties that you see there, and I'll show you also a custom guardrail setup that I've done as well. Here's a closer look at the configuration I have using the PCB ties. Now those PCB ties are pre-gapped. I don't remember exactly who the supplier was. If you do a Google search, you can find plenty of suppliers, I'm sure. I read that these were essential to have on a liftgate assembly, and actually they made the alignment way easier. This is the second time that I did the bridge track or liftgate track section. I had to redo it because the first time there was a significant gap having used the smaller hinges, so I needed to have a longer section on there, so I removed the PCB ties and redid it. So here's the custom guardrail configuration that I've come up with for the other side of the liftgate. So as you can see, I've got the guardrails actually split in the middle. I left a little bit of a gap, and this actually didn't have any negative consequences. The guardrails still work in the same manner that they would otherwise. I was worried that they wouldn't for some reason. I don't know why I was worried that way, but it actually works out just fine. These are definitely important to have for alignment purposes, really. Just keeping the trains aligned, going over this area of the layout. It's a very critical junction. One thing that I have to be careful with, and I may have to correct, is the height difference in the rails. The liftgate, it's not always perfect, and I don't know quite how to adjust the height yet. I'm thinking I might use some very thin styrene as a shim on the left portion to kind of bring those rails up just a tiny bit to make sure that the height is exactly the same. Now it could be a shift in the wood. I mean, there could be a lot of things influencing the height difference, but that's just something that I'm going to have to play around with and keep an eye on moving forward with this layout. So one of the changes that I made on this layout was the curvature of the broadness of the curve coming over the liftgate and into the Chester module. I didn't like how sharp this curve was, and I unfortunately couldn't change it as much as I wanted to, just due to the size of the room that this layout is in, but I was able to make the curve a little bit more broad. Now, one of the problems with this location is obviously the liftgate. I wanted to keep the joint over the liftgate as straight as possible, and there's actually a very slight curve over that joint, but it's actually fairly straight. We take another look at the guardrail location and the joint here between the Chester module and the liftgate. You can actually see that slight curve. This was intentional, and I tried to continue the curve of this going through the liftgate and over the module, and this was definitely tricky, but it was something that was necessary to make this curve a little bit more broad. I spent probably several hours just trying to play around with the angles and trying to factor in the PCB ties and the soldering. It was definitely a mess, but it was certainly necessary to get the curvature, to get the broadness, or to increase the broadness of the curve and to make it the way I wanted. The only issue that I had with this was that I had to make the track run slightly off the edge of the roadbed, and I'll go ahead and show you that now. So from this angle you can clearly see that the track is well off the edge of the roadbed. Now in terms of problems, this isn't a huge deal and quite easy to fix. I just need to go ahead and find some material, whether an additional section of roadbed or maybe some plaster or putty of some kind, or maybe sculpt a mold, something to kind of go ahead and fill in that gap underneath the track. This was something that I tried to avoid. I had already glued the roadbed in place, and since the roadbed goes into those divots in the foam, I couldn't just shift them over one way or another. I couldn't just pull them up, glue them back down at another location. That would involve carving the foam. It would have been a whole thing. And I suppose I could have gone ahead and done that, but I figured, if I was off by several inches, that might obviously be the case to go ahead and do that. But I figured it would just be better to go ahead and use some kind of material to just fill in the gaps for the track or underneath the track and move forward from there. So here's another backdrop scene from tracksideScenery.com that I found that I thought was very fitting for the M&M construction scene that's going to be located on the Chester module. So this is one that's going to represent the M&M Construction Company, and it's just an extension of another scene that kind of represents a road that ends. It's kind of the driveway to the construction scene that's going to lead to a gravel parking lot where equipment can be found. It's going to be used for loading or unloading of bulk material from hopper cars. So M&M Construction would get possibly sand, they could get cement. I haven't really decided exactly what they're going to get. I don't know too much about the prototype, but that's the basic idea behind them. So this is the last custom scene that I got from TracksideScenery.com. And this scene is supposed to represent the downtown area of Chester, Vermont. Now, this one, again, is another compromise. I didn't find anything that was 100% what I wanted, but this gave me the look and the feel that I was going for. I really liked the mountains in the distance. I liked the church. I liked the downtown buildings. It gave me the overall feel that I was looking for. Plus, it gave me the road that I was looking for that's going to cross over the two tracks that you see here. Again, everything's about compromise, but I think this will work well for what I'm going for the downtown Chester area. Now, another note about the downtown Chester scene, or specifically about the Chester Depot, is I've gone ahead and changed the position of the runaround track. Now, as you can see the dashed lines. The actual position where these tracks have ended up is significantly different from where I thought I was going to place these. I did some research and I actually found a kit, and I think I'd mentioned I found a kit at the Amherst Railway Society train show that's an exact replica of the Chester Depot, and this was not going to fit in the space that I had allocated originally for a station. I had actually bought another kit to use as the station, and it was going to fit in that space. It was much, much smaller. So I went ahead and I changed the position of the runaround track. Now, the only thing with that was that the curvature of the runaround on each side is a little bit tighter. Not so much on this side specifically, but definitely on the other side. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So as you can see, the runaround track coming from the back portion of the runaround, or from the part that would connect to the North Walpole module, the sort of fictional area that allows me to do the continuous running, that is a very, very sharp curve. And this was something I was trying to avoid, but I just couldn't get around it due to the positioning, or the new positioning of the runaround. Now, I went ahead and I tried this with a locomotive and a freight car, and it works. I mean, with the rolling stock that I'm going to use, there's no problems. Everything functions the way it should. It does look a little odd, but it works. I'm a little hesitant to move forward on it, but I don't really think there's anything I can do in terms of compromise. So I think it might be something that I have to live with. It's gonna be one of those things that I'm gonna keep in the back of my mind and see if there's something I can do. Now, I did leave a little bit of extra length on this track, just in case I needed, or I could cut away some track. Now, I'm waiting to get the exact measurements on that Chester Depot kit. The site hasn't been updated in a while. I know it's a sort of one-man show on the website. I think it's just a guy that's retired who makes these kits. The website hasn't been updated for several months, so I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm waiting to find out the actual information on the size of the kit, and then I'll have a better idea of whether or not I can actually sort of shrink down the size of this runaround and hopefully get a little bit of that sharpness out of that curve. Okay, everybody, well, that's all I have for you on this layout update. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. I know it's been a bit since the last one. I did have those issues with the audio on the first two videos, the introductory video and the first layout update. Wanted to give a little bit of time in between the re-uploads and this video, so I appreciate your patience on that. And hopefully this video wasn't too long for you. I had a ton of information I wanted to share with you, and I had a whole lot more I wanted to share with you, but I didn't want to make the video too long. In the next video update, I want to talk to you about the electrical systems and which includes the frog juicers, which includes the NCE power cab system that I've got going on. And then I also want to introduce to you the other locomotives that I'm going to be using on the layout and the other rolling stock as well. I may even begin a painting project on the passenger coaches. It depends on weather, obviously, but time will tell on that. So again, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.